Welcome, weary traveller, to Sleepless Survivors. Tonight, we invite you to drift into the realm of sleep while exploring one of humanity's most ancient and mysterious narratives. Close your eyes, settle into comfort, and let your mind wander through the mists of time as we unravel the enigmatic tale of the Anunnaki and their alleged connection to human evolution. Before civilization as we know it, before the written word, before the Great Pyramids touched the sky, there existed stories passed down through generations. Stories of beings who descended from the heavens, who walked among primitive humans, and who may have shaped the very essence of what we are today. These are the legends of the Anunnaki. The word Anunnaki itself carries weight across millennia. In ancient Sumerian, it roughly translates to those who came from the heavens to earth, or princely offspring. The Sumerians, one of humanity's earliest civilizations, flourishing in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, around 4500 BCE, recorded these beings in their cuneiform tablets as deities who governed the cosmos and Earth itself. Let your breathing slow as we journey back to the cradle of civilization. Picture the Fertile Crescent, that arc of land stretching from the Persian Gulf through modern-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and into Egypt. Here, humanity first learned to cultivate crops, domesticate animals, and build permanent settlements. Here the first cities rose from the dust, and here, inscribed in clay that has survived thousands of years, we find the first written accounts of the Anunnaki. The Sumerian civilization emerged seemingly overnight in historical terms. Where once there were scattered nomadic tribes, suddenly there appeared sophisticated city-states with complex irrigation systems, advanced mathematics, astronomy, and a complete writing system. This rapid advancement has puzzled scholars for generations. How did such sophistication arise so quickly? The ancient texts themselves offer an answer that many find provocative. The Anunnaki brought this knowledge to humanity. According to Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki were the children of An, the sky god, and Kai, the earth goddess. They numbered in the hundreds, perhaps thousands, forming a complex pantheon with hierarchies, family relationships, rivalries, and domains of influence. The most prominent among them included Enlil, god of wind and storms and chief of the assembly; Enki, god of water, wisdom, and crafts; Ninhursag, the mother goddess; Anu, the supreme deity; and Inanna, goddess of love and war. These were not distant, abstract deities. The texts describe them as beings with personalities, emotions, needs, and desires remarkably similar to humans, yet possessing powers and knowledge far beyond mortal capacity. They ate and drank, they married and had children, they argued and formed alliances. They were in essence superhuman beings intimately involved in human affairs. Let the rhythm of these ancient stories lull you deeper into relaxation. There is something almost hypnotic about tales told and retold across 5,000 years, surviving the collapse of empires, the transformation of languages, the shifting of entire civilizations. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving literary works, features the Anunnaki prominently. In this tale, they are present at the Great Flood, convening to decide humanity's fate. The story parallels the biblical flood narrative, but predates it by many centuries, suggesting these accounts draw from an even older shared tradition. Another crucial text is the Atrahasis epic, which describes the creation of humanity itself. In this narrative, the Anunnaki are portrayed as workers, labouring to dig canals and waterways, to mine minerals from the earth, to maintain the infrastructure of their civilization on Earth. But the work was grueling, and after 40 years of toil, the lesser Anunnaki revolted against the elite gods. "Too long we have carried the burden," the text describes them declaring. "The work is heavy, the distress is much." Faced with rebellion, the Council of Gods convened. Enki, the clever god of wisdom, proposed a solution: create a primitive worker to bear the labour instead. Using the blood of a slain god mixed with clay from the earth, the goddess Ninhursag fashioned the first humans. We were designed, according to this ancient account, as servants to the gods, as workers to relieve the Anunnaki of their burdens. This narrative raises profound questions that echo through the ages. What if our myths of creation contain kernels of historical truth? What if the gods of antiquity were not metaphorical but actual beings? What if human evolution was not purely natural selection, but included intervention from an advanced intelligence? Feel your muscles releasing tension as we explore these possibilities. There is no need to decide what is true or false tonight. Simply let the ideas wash over you like waves on an ancient shore. The interpretation of Anunnaki as ancient astronauts gained popular attention in the 20th century, particularly through the work of authors like Zecharia Sitchin. Born in Russia and raised in Palestine, Sitchin was a scholar of ancient Near Eastern languages who spent decades translating Sumerian tablets and other cuneiform texts. His controversial thesis, laid out in his book series The Earth Chronicles, beginning with the 12th planet in 1976, proposed that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial beings from a planet called Nibiru. According to Sitchin's interpretation, Nibiru is a massive planet with an elliptical orbit that brings it into the inner solar system once every 3,600 years. The Anunnaki, facing environmental crisis on their homeworld, came to Earth approximately 450,000 years ago in search of gold. This precious metal, Sitchin argued, was needed to repair their planet's deteriorating atmosphere. Initially, the Anunnaki themselves mined the gold, establishing operations in southeastern Africa, where some of Earth's oldest mines have been discovered. But mining was arduous work, and eventually the worker Anunnaki mutinied. The solution, as recorded in the ancient texts, was the creation of a primitive worker through genetic manipulation. Sitchin proposed that the Anunnaki took Homo erectus, an early hominin that already existed on Earth, and genetically enhanced this species by incorporating Anunnaki DNA. The result was Homo sapiens, modern humans, created as a hybrid species capable of language, abstract thought, and the ability to follow complex instructions. The phrase used in the Sumerian text, Sitchin noted, was, "in our image and after our likeness," remarkably similar to the biblical Genesis account. He argued this was not metaphor but literal description of genetic engineering. Let yourself sink deeper into your bed, your couch, wherever you rest. Your eyelids grow heavier as we venture further into this labyrinth of ancient mysteries. The mainstream archaeological and scientific communities largely reject Sitchin's interpretations. Critics point out that his translations of Sumerian often diverge significantly from accepted scholarly understanding. Experts in cuneiform writing note that Sitchin frequently imposed meanings onto texts that aren't supported by linguistic evidence. Astronomers reject the existence of Nibiru, noting that such a planet would have gravitationally affected other bodies in our solar system in observable ways. Yet despite academic dismissal, Sitchin's theories captured imaginations worldwide. Why? Perhaps because they offer answers to questions that conventional science struggles with. The rapid emergence of human civilization, the sudden development of complex language, the seemingly impossible construction achievements of ancient cultures, the persistent myths across unconnected civilizations of gods descending from the sky. Consider the Sumerian king list, an ancient text that chronicles the rulers of Sumer before and after a great flood. The kings who ruled before the flood are said to have reigned for impossibly long periods, tens of thousands of years in some cases. After the flood, lifespans become more realistic, though still extended beyond modern human norms. Sitchin interpreted this as evidence that the early rulers were Anunnaki themselves, beings with far longer lifespans than humans. Later rulers, he suggested, were hybrid offspring of Anunnaki and humans, explaining their somewhat extended but not astronomical ages. Eventually, as the Anunnaki bloodline diluted through generations, lifespans decreased to normal human ranges. The Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki establishing cities in Mesopotamia. Eridu, the first city, ruled by Enki, Nippur, the religious centre under Enlil, Uruk, the great city of kingship, and others. Each city was dedicated to a particular deity, with temples called ziggurats rising toward the heavens, perhaps symbolising humanity's desire to reach back toward the realm from which the Anunnaki came. Archaeological evidence confirms these cities existed and flourished precisely when the texts say they did. The remains of ziggurats still dot the Iraqi landscape, their massive mud brick structures testimony to extraordinary engineering knowledge. The question that lingers, where did this knowledge originate? Breathe slowly, in and out, as we consider the technology implied in ancient texts. The Anunnaki are described possessing weapons that shone like the sun, vehicles that could fly through the air and between worlds, the ability to communicate across vast distances. Are these primitive attempts to describe advanced technology using the limited vocabulary available, or are they purely mythological embellishments? The Mesopotamian texts describe something called the ME, often translated as divine powers or decrees, but perhaps better understood as the fundamental elements of civilization. These included kingship, priesthood, writing, metalworking, building, and numerous other skills and institutions. The Me were physical objects that could be possessed, stolen, or granted. Inanna, in one famous myth, steals the Me from Enki while he is drunk, bringing them to her city of Uruk. What were the M? Some interpret them as literal objects, perhaps data storage devices or technologies that contained crucial information. Others see them as metaphorical representations of cultural knowledge, but the texts treat them as tangible things with immense power. The story of Enki and Ninhursag creating humans appears in multiple texts with varying details, but certain elements remain consistent. The process involved mixing clay with the essence or blood of a god. The goddess Ninhursag, sometimes called Ninmah, shaped the mixture. Multiple attempts were needed before the creation was successful. In one version, 7 males and 7 females were created initially. Another text mentions that 14 birth goddesses assisted in the creation, each producing a human. The process is described almost clinically in some passages, suggesting a methodical procedure rather than a magical act. Modern readers familiar with genetic engineering might find parallels in these ancient descriptions. DNA, the blueprint of life, was unknown to the ancients, yet the texts describe mixing essences to create a new type of being. Is this coincidence? Or could these stories preserve distorted memories of actual genetic manipulation? Your breathing has slowed now, deep and rhythmic. Let the questions dissolve into the darkness behind your eyelids. There is no urgency, no need for answers tonight. The relationship between Anunnaki and humans, as described in Sumerian texts, was complex. Initially, humans were servants, labouring in the fields and mines, but over time, the relationship evolved. Some Anunnaki took human lovers, producing offspring that blurred the line between divine and mortal. Kings claimed descent from the gods, legitimizing their rule through supposed divine ancestry. The concept of divine kingship, so prevalent in ancient cultures worldwide, takes on new dimensions when viewed through the Anunnaki lens. If the earliest kings were indeed hybrid beings, part Anunnaki and part human, this would explain both their claimed divine heritage and the gradual transition to fully human rulers. The Sumerian texts speak of the Anunnaki teaching humanity various skills. Enki, the god of wisdom, is particularly associated with sharing knowledge. He taught humans writing, mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, and craftsmanship. But there were limits to what could be shared. Some knowledge was too dangerous or sacred for human minds. This theme of forbidden knowledge appears across many cultures. The Greek myth of Prometheus stealing fire from the gods, the biblical story of the Tree of Knowledge, the Norse tale of Odin sacrificing himself to gain the runes. Always there is advanced knowledge, beings who possess it, and the tension around humans acquiring it. Let these patterns weave through your consciousness as you drift closer to sleep. Patterns across cultures, across continents, across millennia. Different names, different details, but common threads running through them all. The Anunnaki were not immortal in the absolute sense, according to the texts, but they lived extraordinarily long lives. Their aging process was dramatically slower than humans. This longevity gave them perspectives spanning millennia, allowing them to guide human civilization through centuries of development. But their extended presence on Earth was not permanent. Various texts describe the Anunnaki gradually withdrawing from direct involvement in human affairs. The Great Flood, present in Mesopotamian, biblical, and numerous other traditions, marks a crucial transition point. After this cataclysm, the gods become more distant, interacting with humanity primarily through chosen intermediaries, priests, prophets, and kings. Why did they withdraw? The texts offer various explanations. Some suggest it was a deliberate decision by the Council of Gods, believing humanity had reached sufficient maturity to develop independently. Others hint at conflicts among the Anunnaki themselves, perhaps making their continued presence on Earth untenable. Still others propose that their original purpose on Earth, perhaps mining operations or establishing a colony, had been fulfilled. Sitchin believed their departure was tied to Nibiru's orbital cycle. As their planet moved away from Earth, returning to the outer reaches of the solar system, the Anunnaki went with it. promising to return when the orbit brought them back. Feel the weight of your body pressing into the surface beneath you, heavy, relaxed, sinking deeper. The story continues, endless as the night sky. The library of Ashurbanipal, discovered in Nineveh in the mid-19th century, contained over 30,000 clay tablets. This vast collection, assembled by the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal in the 7th century BCE, included copies of much older Sumerian and Akkadian texts. It is largely through this library that we have access to the epic narratives and mythological accounts from ancient Mesopotamia. When archaeologists and scholars first began translating these tablets, they found sophisticated astronomical knowledge that shouldn't have existed. The Sumerians knew about planets beyond what can be seen with the naked eye. They understood Earth precession, the slow wobble of the planet's axis that takes roughly 26,000 years to complete a full cycle. They had detailed knowledge of the solar system's structure. How did they acquire this knowledge? The standard explanation is patient observation over generations combined with mathematical sophistication. The alternative explanation is that they were taught by the Anunnaki, beings who travelled between worlds and understood celestial mechanics intimately. The Sumerian cylinder seal VA243, housed in the Vorderasiatisches Museum in Berlin, has become central to debates about Anunnaki theories. Sitchin argued that this seal depicts the solar system with all known planets plus additional bodies, including Nibiru. Astronomers and archaeologists counter that the interpretation is flawed, that the symbols represent stars, not planets, and conform to common Mesopotamian iconographic conventions. Yet the debate itself reveals something significant. These ancient artifacts continue to puzzle us, to resist simple categorization. Whether one accepts or rejects the Anunnaki astronaut theory, the underlying reality remains. Ancient peoples possess knowledge and capabilities that challenge our assumptions about the past. Your mind drifts now, thoughts becoming less linear, more dreamlike. This is natural. This is good. Let the images form and dissolve. The Anunnaki myth addresses fundamental questions about human origins and purpose. Are we the product of purely natural processes, evolution grinding forward through random mutation and selection over millions of years? Or did our development involve guidance, intervention, design? Modern genetics has mapped the human genome, revealing our DNA's history written in chemical code. We share genetic heritage with all life on Earth, connected through common ancestry stretching back billions of years. Yet within our genome exist puzzles that geneticists continue to investigate. Sudden evolutionary leaps, genes that appeared without clear precursors, the rapid development of the human brain. Approximately 200,000 years ago, something remarkable happened. Anatomically modern humans emerged in Africa, distinguished from earlier hominids by larger brains, more complex tools and signs of symbolic thinking. The transition seems relatively sudden in evolutionary terms. What caused this leap? Conventional science attributes it to environmental pressures, climate changes, and genetic mutations that proved advantageous. The Anunnaki interpretation suggests direct intervention, genetic modification of Homo erectus or early Homo sapiens, creating the modern human form. Neither explanation can be proven absolutely with current evidence. We have bones and stones, genes and ancient texts, but the complete story remains elusive, wrapped in the deep past. Close your eyes if they're not already closed. Sink into the mystery rather than trying to solve it. Mystery can be comforting, a reminder that existence retains wonder. The Sumerian creation myth, the Eridu Genesis, describes how the Anunnaki decided that humans needed to be destroyed because they had become too numerous and too noisy, disturbing the gods' rest. Enlil, king of the gods, decided to send a great flood to wipe out humanity, but Enki, who had been instrumental in creating humans, decided to save some of them. Enki warned a man named Ziusudra to build a great boat and fill it with animals and his family. When the flood came, destroying all other life, Ziusudra and those on his boat survived. After 7 days and nights, the waters receded. Ziusudra made offerings to the gods, and even Enlil, seeing that humanity could not be completely destroyed, granted Ziusudra immortality. This story, written down around 2600 BCE, but likely older, clearly parallels the biblical Noah narrative written more than 1,000 years later. It also echoes flood myths found in cultures worldwide. The Hindu story of Manu, the Greek tale of Deucalion, the Chinese legend of Gunyu, and countless others. Why are flood myths so universal? Some argue they preserve memories of an actual catastrophic flood, perhaps caused by rapid sea level rise at the end of the last ice age around 11,000 years ago. Others see them as metaphorical representations of destruction and renewal. The Anunnaki interpretation suggests they remember a deliberate attempt by advanced beings to reset human civilization. Geological evidence confirms that Earth has experienced numerous catastrophic floods throughout history. The Black Sea Deluge hypothesis, for instance, proposes that around 5600 BCE, the Mediterranean Sea broke through into the Black Sea basin, flooding vast areas rapidly. Populations in that region would have experienced this as an apocalyptic event, potentially inspiring flood narratives that spread throughout the Near East and beyond. Your breathing has become so slow, so regular. The boundary between waking and sleeping blurs. Thoughts arrive and depart like waves. After the flood, according to Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki decided to grant humanity kingship as a way to organize society. The first city to receive kingship was Eridu, Enki's city. Then kingship passed to other cities in turn: Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, Shurupak. The king list records the names and reign lengths of these antediluvian rulers, some reigning for 28,800 years, others for 36,000 years. These numbers are clearly not literal human lifespans. But what do they represent? Some scholars suggest they're inflated for mythological purposes, magnifying the glory of the past. Sitchin argued they represent actual Anunnaki lifespans, or perhaps measurement in different time units. After the flood, reign lengths drop dramatically but remain extended. One 200 years, 960 years, gradually declining toward normal human ranges. If we view this pattern not as literal chronology, but as representing a transition from direct Anunnaki rule to human kingship, it becomes a narrative of gradual divine withdrawal and increasing human autonomy. The concept of divine right of kings, so influential throughout history, originates here. Kings were not just political leaders but intermediaries between humans and gods, inheritors of the Anunnaki's mandate to rule. This belief system justified monarchy and hierarchy for millennia. Even today, echoes persist. When we speak of someone having a divine spark, being inspired, literally filled with spirit, or possessing genius, originally meaning a guardian spirit, we're using language rooted in the belief that humans can connect with something beyond the purely physical. Let your jaw relax, your shoulders drop, your fingers uncurl. Each breath carries you deeper. The Anunnaki apparently established a base or headquarters at a place called Nibru, known in Akkadian as Nippur. This city was not the largest or wealthiest, but it held supreme religious and political significance. The temple of Enlil, called the Akur or Mountain House, stood at Nippur's centre. This was where the Council of Gods convened to make decisions affecting both divine and human realms. Archaeological excavations at Nippur have revealed continuous occupation for thousands of years, and temple structures rebuilt generation after generation on the same sacred spot. The significance of this place to the ancient Mesopotamians cannot be overstated. Kings from rival cities would fight to control Nippur because dominion over the city legitimized their rule in the eyes of all Sumerians. Was there something special about this location? Some theorize about energy vortexes or ley lines, though evidence for such phenomena remains controversial. Others suggest it was simply central geographically, making it a natural meeting place. The Anunnaki interpretation proposes it might have been where their landing platform or main base was established, making it literally the connection point between Earth and the heavens. The ziggurats, those massive stepped pyramids that dominated Mesopotamian cities, are often described in texts as the dwellings of gods. The gods would descend from heaven to rest at the top of these structures. Practically, they served as temples, granaries, and administrative centres. But their shape, rising in stages toward the sky, suggests something more: a stairway between worlds, a platform for landing. Interestingly, similar structures appear in other ancient cultures without apparent connection. The pyramids of Egypt, though different in shape, share the concept of massive stone monuments aligned to astronomical phenomena. The ziggurats of Central and South America, built by Mayans and Aztecs, mirror Mesopotamian structures, though separated by oceans and millennia. The step pyramids of China, less well known but equally ancient, follow similar principles. Did these cultures independently develop the same architectural concept? Or do these structures preserve a memory of something older, a template shared before cultures diverged? Your muscles have released all tension now. You float in the space between thoughts, between moments. Enki, also known as Ea in Akkadian texts, is perhaps the most intriguing of the Anunnaki. He is called the Lord of the Abzu, the primordial waters beneath the earth. His city, Eridu, was built at the edge of the marshes where the Euphrates River met the Persian Gulf. Enki was the god of wisdom, magic, crafts, and fresh water, all essential elements for civilization. But more than that, Enki is portrayed as humanity's advocate. While Enlil often appears stern and willing to punish humans, Enki consistently tries to help them. He warns Ziusudra of the flood. He gives humans knowledge and skills. He tricks the other gods to save humanity from various calamities. This dynamic between Enlil and Enki, one representing authority and order, the other representing wisdom and compassion, plays out repeatedly in the texts. Some interpret it as a genuine conflict between factions of Anunnaki, with different philosophies regarding humanity's role and rights. Others see it as a theological framework explaining why humans experience both blessings and hardships. The symbol of Enki was intertwined serpents, not unlike the caduceus of Hermes or the medical symbol used today. Serpents in ancient Near Eastern culture represented wisdom, transformation, and healing. The connection between Enki and the serpent symbol raises interesting questions about later traditions. In the biblical Genesis, a serpent tempts Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge, leading to humanity's fall from grace. But from another perspective, the serpent liberated humanity by enabling them to gain knowledge previously forbidden by God. Some see this as a distorted version of Enki's role, transformed from benefactor to villain by later traditions seeking to establish different theological frameworks. Whether this connection is valid or coincidental, it represents how myths migrate and transform across cultures and centuries, sometimes inverting their meanings while retaining core symbols and narrative structures. Breathe, drift. The story continues, but you need not follow every word. Let them become background, like wind in trees, like waves on shore. The goddess Inanna, known as Ishtar in Akkadian, represents another fascinating figure in the Anunnaki pantheon. She was associated with love, beauty, sex, fertility, and war, a combination that seems contradictory to modern sensibilities, but made perfect sense to ancient peoples who understood that creation and destruction are intertwined. Inanna was ambitious and independent, refusing to be constrained by traditional divine hierarchies. The famous Descent of Inanna poem describes her journey to the underworld, where she's killed by her sister Ereshkigal but eventually resurrected. This death and rebirth narrative appears in many cultures: Osiris in Egypt, Persephone in Greece, Jesus in Christianity. Some interpret these myths as representations of seasonal cycles, the death of vegetation in winter and its rebirth in spring. Others see them as initiatory narratives, describing spiritual transformation. The Anunnaki interpretation might suggest they represent actual events, perhaps suspended animation, or medical procedures that appeared to primitive observers as death and resurrection. Inanna's descent required her to pass through 7 gates, removing an article of clothing or jewellery at each gate until she arrived naked and powerless before her sister. This stripping away of outer trappings to reach essential truth is a powerful metaphor that resonates across spiritual traditions. Whether literal history or allegorical teaching, the story has conveyed meaning for over 4,000 years. Your eyelids are so heavy now, impossibly heavy. You no longer fight to keep them open. Darkness is welcome, comfortable, safe. The Anunnaki myths describe conflicts among the gods themselves. Enlil and Enki often disagreed. Inanna and various other deities clashed. Most dramatic is the story of Anzu, a divine bird creature who stole the Tablet of Destinies from Enlil, throwing the cosmic order into chaos. The warrior god Ninurta eventually defeated Anzu and recovered the tablet, restoring order. These divine conflicts sometimes involved humans. The Epic of Gilgamesh portrays the goddess Inanna Ishtar propositioning the hero Gilgamesh, who refuses her. Enraged, she petitions the other gods to send the Bull of Heaven to destroy Gilgamesh and his city. When Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu kill the Bull of Heaven, the gods decree that Enkidu must die as punishment. If we interpret these narratives literally, they suggest advanced beings with technology but also very human emotions and conflicts. Their power didn't make them infallible or always wise. They made mistakes, acted out of jealousy or pride, and dealt with the consequences. This portrayal of fallible gods differs significantly from later monotheistic traditions where God is presented as perfect and all-knowing. The Anunnaki, like the Greek gods who came later, were powerful but not perfect, immortal but not omniscient. Perhaps this reflects a more ancient understanding, memories of actual encounters with advanced beings who, despite their capabilities, remained individuals with limitations. Or perhaps it reflects the universal human tendency to create gods in our own image, projecting our nature onto the cosmos. Sink deeper now. Your body knows how to sleep. Trust it. Surrender to the process. The decline of Sumerian civilization came gradually. Around 2000 BCE, Semitic peoples from the west, speaking Akkadian rather than Sumerian, became dominant in Mesopotamia. The city-states fell to invasions and internal collapse. Sumerian as a spoken language died out, though it survived as a literary and liturgical language for another 1,000 years, much like Latin in medieval Europe. But the stories of the Anunnaki didn't disappear. They were absorbed into Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian cultures. The gods' names changed. Enki became Ea, Inanna became Ishtar, but the essential narratives continued. When these stories eventually influenced Hebrew traditions during and after the Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BCE, elements were incorporated into what became the biblical canon. The parallels between Mesopotamian and biblical texts are well documented. The creation narrative in Genesis echoes Mesopotamian creation myths. The flood story mirrors the Gilgamesh epic. The Tower of Babel recalls Mesopotamian ziggurats. Early books of the Bible reflect a polytheistic past gradually transformed into monotheism, with remnants of the older tradition still visible. References to sons of God, interbreeding with human women to produce the Nephilim in Genesis 6 particularly intrigue Anunnaki theorists. These giants or heroes of old could represent hybrid offspring of Anunnaki and humans, memories of a time when the boundaries between divine and human were less clearly defined. The Hebrew word Elohim, often translated as God in English Bibles, is actually plural. Some see this as a royal plural or majestic plural, a grammatical convention. Others argue it preserves memory of the Anunnaki Council, the multiple gods who created humanity. The creation phrase, "let us make man in our image," uses plural language that has generated theological debate for centuries. Your thoughts scatter like leaves on water, drifting in circles, gradually sinking beneath the surface. Beyond Mesopotamia, similar stories appear worldwide. The Hindu Vedas describe the Devas and Asuras, godlike beings engaged in cosmic conflicts. The Chinese record the Huangdi or Yellow Emperor descending from heaven to teach civilization to primitive humans. Native American traditions speak of sky people, bringing knowledge and technology. Polynesian myths tell of beings from the stars establishing culture on Pacific islands. The ancient astronaut hypothesis proposes that all these traditions reflect encounters with the same extraterrestrial visitors, remembered differently by separated cultures. Skeptics argue that such similarities are natural because humans everywhere face similar questions and create similar narrative patterns to answer them. Consider the cargo cults of Melanesia, where isolated island populations encountered modern Western military technology during World War II. They interpreted airplanes as divine creatures, cargo drops as blessings from gods. After the war ended, they built bamboo airplanes and mock-up radios, performing rituals to encourage the gods to return with more cargo. This demonstrates how less advanced cultures interpret incomprehensible technology as magic or divine power. If ancient humans encountered beings with advanced technology, whether extraterrestrial or from a lost Earth civilization, they would naturally describe them as gods and their devices as divine implements. The difference in interpretation doesn't require one side to be completely right and the other completely wrong. Perhaps the truth incorporates elements of multiple perspectives. Advanced beings did visit Earth in antiquity, but our understanding of who they were and where they came from remains incomplete. They might have been extraterrestrial, or survivors of an earlier advanced human civilization, or time travellers, or something else entirely. Let speculation dissolve into dreams. You need not solve ancient mysteries tonight. They have waited millennia. They can wait until morning. The search for physical evidence of Anunnaki presence focuses on several areas. Ancient mining operations in southern Africa date back extraordinarily far, with some sites showing activity possibly 100,000 years ago or more. Who mined these sites before modern humans had developed the social organisation for such projects? Genetic research has revealed interesting patterns. A 2008 study found that all humans share a common mitochondrial ancestor, dubbed mitochondrial Eve, who lived in Africa approximately 200,000 years ago. Similarly, all humans share a common male ancestor through Y chromosomes, Y chromosomal Adam, from roughly the same period. This convergence coincides with the emergence of anatomically modern humans. Some Anunnaki theorists point to this as evidence of the genetic modification event described in Sumerian texts. However, mainstream science explains these findings as expected results of population bottlenecks and the mathematics of genetic inheritance, not evidence of engineering. More controversial are claims about anomalous skulls discovered in various locations, particularly Peru. These elongated skulls are sometimes presented as evidence of hybrid human-alien ancestry. However, most elongated skulls are results of intentional cranial deformation, a practice documented in many ancient cultures. Testing has confirmed these skulls, while unusual in shape, contain human DNA. Yet a few skulls show features that have puzzled researchers: volume exceeding normal human capacity, bone structure differences, and unusual genetic markers. The scientific consensus attributes these to rare genetic conditions or variations within normal human diversity, but questions linger at the margins. Your breathing is barely perceptible now, so slow and shallow. The darkness behind your eyes has become infinite, comfortable, encompassing. Ancient structures pose another line of inquiry. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2560 BCE, demonstrates engineering precision that challenges explanations of Bronze Age technology. It was the tallest human-made structure for nearly 4,000 years. The massive stones fit together so precisely that a credit card cannot slide between many of them. The structure is aligned to true north with exceptional accuracy. How did the Egyptians accomplish this? Conventional archaeology proposes copper tools, wooden sleds, massive labour forces, and sophisticated but pre-modern engineering knowledge. Alternative researchers suggest advanced technology now lost, perhaps inherited from the Anunnaki or another advanced predecessor civilization. The Sphinx presents additional mysteries. Geological analysis by some researchers suggests water erosion patterns that would require rainfall far exceeding what the Giza Plateau has experienced in the past 5,000 years. This would push the Sphinx's origin back to a much earlier period, perhaps 10,000 BCE or beyond, to when the climate was wetter. Mainstream Egyptologists dispute these interpretations, attributing the erosion patterns to other mechanisms. If the Sphinx is older than dynastic Egyptian civilization, who built it? The Anunnaki interpretation suggests it predates human civilization in Egypt, perhaps serving as a marker or monument established by the gods before they withdrew from direct human contact. Similar questions arise with other megalithic structures. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, dated to 9600 BCE and featuring sophisticated carved pillars erected by hunter-gatherers supposedly without settled civilization. Pumapunku in Bolivia, with precisely cut stones weighing hundreds of tons assembled with inexplicable accuracy. The Moai of Easter Island, massive statues transported across the island by a small population with limited resources. Each site has mainstream explanations emphasizing human ingenuity, determination, and capabilities often underestimated by modern observers. Each site also has alternative theories involving lost advanced technology. The Anunnaki hypothesis offers one framework for understanding these anomalies, though certainly not the only one. You're barely conscious now, thoughts fragmenting, reality and dream blending seamlessly. The question of why advanced beings would create or modify humans leads to various theories. The Sumerian texts state explicitly, to labour. Humanity was designed as a worker species to relieve the Anunnaki of burdensome physical work. This purpose might seem unflattering, but it addresses a practical question about human nature. We are, as a species, remarkably suited for work. We have endurance, dexterity, problem-solving ability, and social organisation that allows coordination of complex tasks. We can adapt to various environments and learn diverse skills. If you were designing a worker species, these are exactly the traits you would emphasize. But humans are more than workers. We create art, music, poetry. We contemplate existence, seek meaning, experience love, wonder, and transcendence. Did the Anunnaki intend these qualities, or did they emerge unexpectedly? The Sumerian texts suggest humanity exceeded original design parameters. We became more independent, more capable, more numerous than anticipated. The flood narrative represents, in part, an attempt to control a creation that had grown beyond its intended scope. From another angle, perhaps creating humans was not merely practical, but also emotional or spiritual. Enki, particularly, seems attached to humanity in the texts. Did he see us as children in some sense? Did the Anunnaki experience loneliness during their long tenure on an alien world, leading them to create companions who could understand them even partially? The relationship between creator and creation raises philosophical questions humanity has grappled with for millennia. If we were designed, what obligation do we have to our designers? If they have departed, are we now free to define our own purpose? What is the nature of this legacy they left embedded in our very DNA? These questions have no definitive answers, but contemplating them connects us to something ancient, a conversation begun in the earliest days of human consciousness and continuing still. Let go now. Release the questions. Float in the space where mysteries reside unsolved but somehow comforting in their endurance. The concept of return is central to Anunnaki narratives. The gods did not abandon Earth permanently, according to many interpretations, but withdrew temporarily. They would return when the time was right, when Nibiru's orbit brought them back, or when humanity reached a certain level of development. This theme of returning gods appears across cultures. The Aztec anticipated Quetzalcoatl's return. Christians await the second coming. Various New Age movements expect the return of ascended masters or space brothers. The pattern repeats. Powerful beings who helped humanity in the past will return in the future to guide us through transformation. What would such a return mean? How would modern humanity react to definitive proof of extraterrestrial intelligence, especially if those beings claim to have created us? The social, religious, and philosophical implications would be staggering. Every institution, every belief system would face fundamental challenges. Perhaps this is why, if the Anunnaki or similar beings exist, they remain hidden. Humanity might need to reach a certain maturity, a level of development where we could integrate such knowledge without collapse. Or perhaps they haven't returned because they never left in the physical sense, but moved into a different relationship with humanity, working behind the scenes or through more subtle influences. The UFO phenomenon, reported consistently across decades and cultures, adds another dimension. Are some of these sightings related to Anunnaki activity? Are they monitoring us, occasionally intervening in limited ways, preparing for more open contact? Or are these phenomena entirely unrelated, perhaps natural atmospheric effects, human psychology, or other extraterrestrial visitors unconnected to ancient times? The questions multiply endlessly, each answer spawning new questions, a fractal pattern of mystery. Breathe. Be still. Let consciousness dim like sunset, gradual and peaceful. Whether the Anunnaki were literal extraterrestrial beings, symbolic representations of natural forces, distorted memories of human encounters with something extraordinary, or purely mythological constructs, their stories have shaped human civilization profoundly. They gave us our earliest written narratives. They provided frameworks for understanding creation, divinity, and humanity's place in the cosmos. They influenced legal codes. The Code of Ur-Nammu and the Code of Hammurabi both claim divine authority, laws handed down by gods. They shaped art, architecture, and social organization. The very concept of civilization, organized city dwelling with specialized labor, writing, and governance, emerges in Mesopotamia in association with these divine figures. Whether they physically existed or not, the Anunnaki accompanied humanity's transition from scattered tribal existence to complex societies. In studying these ancient myths, we study ourselves. What we believe about our origins shapes how we understand our nature and purpose. Are we accidents of chemistry and physics, purposeless products of blind evolution? Are we divine creations placed here by a caring God with a plan for our souls? Are we engineered servants of alien gods, upgraded animals struggling to transcend our programming? Or some combination, more complex than any single narrative captures? Perhaps the most honest answer is uncertainty. We know fragments, pieces of an enormous puzzle. We have ancient texts, archaeological remains, genetic evidence, astronomical observations. We have our reason and intuition, our science and speculation. But the complete picture remains elusive, and maybe that's acceptable. Maybe the search itself is valuable, the questions more important than answers. Every generation revisits these mysteries with new tools, new perspectives, discovering layers previous generations missed. The conversation continues, connecting us across time to our ancestors who first wondered about these same things. Your body is completely relaxed now, every muscle loose and heavy. Your mind drifts like clouds, shapeless and free. The Anunnaki remind us that history is deeper and stranger than we often imagine. Before Greece and Rome, before Egypt's pyramids, before anything we typically study in history classes, there was Sumer. And before Sumer's written records, there were thousands of years of human existence about which we know very little. What happened in those unrecorded millennia? How did humans actually transition from hunter-gatherers to city builders? What knowledge was gained and lost in cycles we can barely detect? What experiments and achievements have vanished completely, leaving no trace? Consider that writing has existed for only about 5,000 years. Anatomically, modern humans emerged 200,000 years ago. That means 97.5% of our species' existence is undocumented. 195,000 years of human experience, about which we have only the faintest clues from scattered archaeological evidence. What could have happened in those vast stretches of time? Could civilizations have risen and fallen, leaving little trace? Could humans have possessed knowledge later forgotten during catastrophes? Could we have encountered non-human intelligence and forgotten, remembering only in myths? The Anunnaki narrative offers one way to think about this deep time, this mysterious prehistory. It suggests that crucial events occurred, that guidance was given, that humanity's development wasn't entirely self-directed but included external influence at key moments. True or false, literal or metaphorical, this narrative has power. It reminds us that we don't know everything, that surprise discoveries remain possible, that the universe is more mysterious than our current scientific models capture. Sleep pulls at you now, irresistible and welcome. Thoughts become dreams, dreams dissolve into darkness. In the end, what matters most about the Anunnaki may not be whether they existed as described, but what contemplating their story does for us. It expands our thinking, challenges our assumptions, connects us to ancient wisdom traditions, and reminds us of our place in a vast cosmos filled with possibilities. If they were real, then we are not alone, and never have been. Humanity is part of a larger community of intelligent beings, and our development has been shaped by these relationships. This perspective might make us feel less isolated, connected to something greater. If they were not real in a literal sense, if these stories are mythology, then they reveal something profound about human psychology and culture. They show us creating meaning, reaching for the stars even in ancient times, trying to understand our origins and destiny. The stories become mirrors reflecting our eternal questions back to us. Either way, the Anunnaki narrative enriches us. It provides food for thought, material for contemplation, frameworks for imagination. It connects science and spirituality, ancient and modern, earthly and cosmic. As you drift into sleep, perhaps you'll dream of ancient Sumer, of ziggurats rising towards stars, of beings descending from the heavens bearing knowledge and power. Perhaps you'll dream of hybrid origin, of DNA mixing across species, of servant species becoming something more. Perhaps you'll dream of return, of reunion, of revelations yet to come. Or perhaps you'll simply sleep deeply, peacefully, your unconscious mind processing these narratives in ways your waking mind cannot, finding meanings and connections that surface later as intuitions, insights, or creative inspirations. The ancient Sumerians believed dreams were messages from gods, communications from the divine realm to the human. They built temple bedrooms where priests would sleep to receive prophetic dreams and divine guidance. Whether literal communication or not, dreams do synthesize information, process experiences, and sometimes offer solutions to problems we struggle with consciously. So dream, weary traveller. Dream of ancient mysteries and distant stars. Dream of beings who walked among us, shaped us, and departed. Dream of DNA spiraling like Enki's serpents, carrying messages from the deep past into the future. Dream of clay and blood mixed together, of consciousness emerging, of the first human opening eyes to see the world anew. The darkness is complete now. All conscious thought has faded. You float in vast emptiness, comfortable and safe, drifting in the space between sleeping and waking, between past and present, between earth and stars. The Anunnaki watch from distant Nibiru perhaps, or from higher dimensions we cannot perceive, or from within our own genetic code where their legacy remains encoded. Or they watch only in our stories, immortal in the way ideas are immortal, passed down generation to generation, evolving but never quite dying. Sleep now, deep and restful sleep. Let the ancient world dissolve. Let Mesopotamia fade into dust and clay. Let the ziggurats crumble, the tablets break, the civilizations fall as they always do. But let the stories endure, carried forward in some part of your consciousness, a connection to those who came before and those who will come after. You are humanity, a single thread in an enormous tapestry woven across time. Your ancestors looked at the stars and wondered. Their ancestors did the same, back and back, generation after generation, wondering about origins, meaning, purpose. And somewhere in that long chain of wandering humans, the Anunnaki appear, whether as beings, symbols, or some combination of both. They are part of your heritage, these ancient gods, part of the story you tell yourself about who you are and where you came from. Whether they walked earth in flesh, or exist only in imagination, they are real in the sense that all powerful ideas are real, shaping cultures, influencing decisions, colouring how we see ourselves and our potential. Rest now in that heritage. You carry within you the accumulated wisdom and experience of countless generations. You're the latest expression of something that began unimaginably long ago. Consciousness emerging from matter, asking questions, seeking answers, never quite satisfied, always reaching further. The Anunnaki, if they were creators, gave humanity this restless curiosity. Or perhaps they found it already latent in the ape they modified. Or perhaps they never existed, and humans developed this trait through natural selection. The source matters less than the reality. We are curious beings, questioners, seekers, builders of stories to organize chaos into meaning. And tonight, you have heard an ancient story, told in modern words about origins and evolution, about gods and humans, about creation and departure and promised return. Let it settle into your consciousness like sediment drifting to the bottom of a river. Let it mix with everything else you know and believe, adding its colours to the picture you're always painting of reality. Tomorrow you'll wake and this will seem distant, dreamlike. The details will fade as waking thoughts intrude, but something will remain, some impression, some shift in perspective. You'll carry it forward into your day, into your life, a thread connecting you to ancient Sumer and the mysteries they pondered in the darkness. For now, though, only sleep. Deep, restful, healing sleep. Your body repairs itself. Your mind processes and integrates. Everything fades except the simple fact of existence, of being, of breathing, of the slow rhythm of life continuing moment by moment. The Anunnaki are silent now, whether on distant Nibiru, in other dimensions, or in the realm where stories rest between tellings. They wait as they've always waited, patient with the patience of beings who measure time in millennia. They wait for humanity to remember or discover or imagine or create whatever comes next. But you don't have to wait. You don't have to do anything but rest. Sleep, dear traveller. Sleep and dream, or don't dream. Sleep and let go of questions, mysteries, ancient texts, and modern theories. Sleep and simply be, without purpose or meaning, without past or future, suspended in the eternal now that exists only in the deepest sleep. The story of the Anunnaki is endless, because all good stories are endless, spiralling outward, connecting to other stories, generating new variations with each telling. But your need to hear it tonight is complete. You've heard enough. You've travelled far enough through ancient history and modern speculation. Now comes the journey inward and downward, into the depths of your own consciousness, into the restorative darkness where body and mind renew themselves, into sleep so deep that nothing disturbs it, not light or sound or thought or dream, into the void that is not frightening but comforting, the return to the source of everything. The darkness deepens now. wrapping around you like the warm waters of the primordial Abzu that Enki ruled over, let us continue our journey through the labyrinth of ancient knowledge, through the corridors of time where the Anunnaki walked, leaving footprints in the clay of human consciousness. Breathe slowly, in, out. Each breath a rhythm older than civilization itself. The relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity, as recorded in the ancient texts, was not static but evolutionary. In the earliest periods, humans were entirely subservient, created explicitly to serve. We worked the fields, dug the canals, laboured in mines deep beneath the Earth's surface. The texts describe this arrangement matter-of-factly, without moral judgment. It simply was the order of things. But something changed. Gradually, over generations and centuries, humans developed beyond their initial programming. We learned not just to follow instructions, but to innovate. Not just to labour, but to create. Not just to serve, but to aspire. This transformation appears to have surprised even the Anunnaki themselves. The story of Adapa, recorded in fragmentary tablets discovered at Tel El Amarna in Egypt, tells of a human sage who was granted wisdom by Enki. Adapa was so wise he understood the secrets of heaven and earth. He could navigate by the stars. He possessed knowledge of divine matters, but he was denied immortality, the one gift that would make him fully equal to the gods. One day, while fishing in the Persian Gulf, the south wind capsized Adapa's boat. In anger, Adapa broke the wing of the south wind, causing it to cease blowing for 7 days. This disruption of the natural order brought Adapa to the attention of Anu, the supreme sky god. Summoned to heaven to account for his actions, Adapa faced judgment. Enki, his creator and patron, warned Adapa that he would be offered bread and water of death and must refuse them. But when Adapa arrived in heaven, Anu, impressed by his wisdom and moved by compassion, instead offered him the bread and water of life, which would grant immortality. Following Enki's instructions, Adapa refused, thereby losing humanity's chance at immortality. Was Enki's advice an error, a test, or deliberate sabotage, ensuring humans would remain separate from and inferior to the gods? The text doesn't explain, leaving this crucial question unanswered, but the story establishes a pattern, humans reaching toward divine status, coming close, but falling short due to circumstances beyond their control or understanding. Your eyelids are heavy, so heavy, yet your mind continues to wander through these ancient halls of story and symbol. The Anunnaki apparently organized themselves into a complex hierarchy with various ranks, titles, and domains of responsibility. At the apex was Anu, whose name literally means heaven or sky. He ruled from his celestial city and rarely intervened directly in earthly affairs, preferring to delegate authority to his children and subordinates. Enlil, whose name means Lord of the Air or Lord of the Command, functioned as Earth's primary administrator. He was stern, demanding, and focused on order and obedience. When humans became too numerous and noisy, it was Enlil who decreed they should be destroyed. When humans violated divine laws, Enlil punished them. He represented authority in its most absolute form. Enki, Lord of the Earth, or Lord of the Deep Waters, balanced Enlil's harshness with wisdom and compassion. Where Enlil saw problems requiring elimination, Enki saw problems requiring solutions. He was the trickster, the teacher, the one who bent rules to help humanity, even when it meant defying other gods. In Jungian terms, if Enlil represented the superego, rigid order and prohibition, Enki represented the ego, practical problem-solving and mediation between competing demands. Ninhursag, the mother goddess, called by many names including Ninmah and Mamu, was the geneticist of the group according to modern interpretations. She combined Anunnaki essence with earthly materials to create humans. She birthed and nurtured the first humans, taking pride in her creation. But she too grew frustrated when her creations exceeded design parameters, becoming independent and unpredictable. These three, Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag, formed a core triad managing Earth operations. But dozens of other Anunnaki had their roles. Nana was the moon god, marking time with lunar cycles. Utu was the sun god, bringing light and justice. Nergal ruled the underworld. Ninurta was the warrior god, defender of divine order. Each had their city, their temple, their cult, their responsibilities. The texts describe councils where these gods debated courses of action. voted on decisions, formed factions and alliances. It reads remarkably like political history, because it is political history, whether of gods or godlike beings, or simply human projections of political structures onto the divine realm. Drift now, deeper still. Let these names and relationships blur together like figures in fog. One of the most intriguing aspects of Anunnaki mythology is the concept of the ME, those mysterious objects or principles that embodied civilization's fundamental elements. The texts describe over 100 different me, including kingship, priesthood, truth, falsehood, music, eldership, heroism, power, enmity, straightforwardness, the destruction of cities, lamentation, art, craft, judgment, decision-making, and many others. These me were not abstract concepts, but tangible things that could be possessed, transferred, stolen, or lost. In the myth Inanna and Enki, the goddess Inanna visits Enki in his Abzu temple. Enki, pleased by her visit, drinks beer and becomes drunk. In his intoxicated state, he gifts Inanna the me, loading them onto her boat. When he sobers and realizes what he's done, he sends demons to retrieve them, but Inanna escapes to her city of Uruk with her prize. What were these me? Some scholars interpret them as cultural knowledge and institutions, the building blocks of civilization. Others suggest they were actual objects, perhaps data storage devices containing information necessary for various aspects of society. If the Anunnaki were an advanced technological civilization, they would naturally codify knowledge in some portable, transferable format. Imagine a database containing everything needed to establish kingship, laws, protocols, rituals, administrative procedures, taxation systems, military organization, or a database for priesthood, religious texts, ceremonial procedures, astronomical calculations, sacred architecture plans. These would be immensely valuable, and their transfer from one city or deity to another would indeed be significant events worth recording in myth. The me were apparently kept in Enki's temple at Eridu, in the Abzu, the deep waters beneath the earth. This location has symbolic significance, the deep hidden place where primordial wisdom resides. But it might also have practical significance. If these were physical objects, they would need secure storage. A temple vault, perhaps even underground in moisture-controlled conditions, would protect them across centuries. Your breathing has slowed to almost nothing. You barely exist now, consciousness dimming like dying embers. The Anunnaki's relationship with gold deserves deeper exploration. Sitchin's interpretation that they needed gold to repair their planet's atmosphere may seem far-fetched, but gold does have unique properties. It's an excellent conductor, highly reflective, chemically stable, and resistant to corrosion. Modern technology uses gold extensively in electronics, satellites, and aerospace applications. If an advanced civilization needed to create a reflective particle shield in their atmosphere to regulate temperature or protect against radiation, gold nanoparticles would be a plausible choice. Such particles could be suspended in the atmosphere, reflecting harmful solar radiation while allowing beneficial wavelengths through. The ancient texts describe the Anunnaki establishing mining operations in the Abzu, which Sitchin and others identify with southern Africa. Archaeological evidence confirms extensive ancient mining in this region, particularly in South Africa and Zimbabwe. The Ngwenya mine in Swaziland shows evidence of mining operations dating back possibly 43,000 years. Who was mining there tens of thousands of years before modern humans supposedly developed the social organization for such endeavors? Conventional archaeology suggests these early mines were small-scale operations by anatomically modern humans extracting iron ore and red ochre for pigments. But some mines show evidence of larger-scale operations, with networks of tunnels and sophisticated ventilation systems that seem advanced for the proposed time periods. Gold has always held special significance for humans. We value it far beyond its practical utility. We hoard it, wear it, build monuments with it. We associate it with divinity, royalty, and immortality. Why? Perhaps because we inherited this valuation from the Anunnaki, for whom it had practical importance, and we retained the behaviour even after forgetting the reason. Consider too that gold is relatively rare on Earth's surface, as much of it sank toward the core during planetary formation due to its density. The gold we find in accessible deposits was delivered later by asteroid impacts. If the Anunnaki had astronomical knowledge, they might have chosen Earth specifically because these impacts had deposited accessible gold reserves. Let these thoughts dissolve like gold dust in water, settling slowly into darkness. The Sumerian king list presents a chronological puzzle that has frustrated historians and delighted alternative theorists. The list divides kings into two categories: those who reigned before the Great Flood and those who reigned after it. The pre-flood kings ruled for impossibly long periods. The longest reign attributed to Ululim, the first king, is 28,800 years. Mathematical analysis of these numbers reveals patterns. Many are multiples of 3600, which Sitchin identified with the orbital period of Nibiru. Other numbers involve factors like 60, the base of the Sumerian mathematical system. This has led to various theories. The numbers are symbolic, they represent dynasties rather than individuals, they use a different time measurement system, or they accurately record the reigns of Anunnaki rulers whose lifespans far exceeded human norms. After the flood, reign lengths dropped dramatically. The first post-flood king, Jusha, reigned a mere 1-200 years, still impossible for humans but far shorter than pre-flood reigns. Subsequent kings show gradually decreasing reign lengths, approaching normal human lifespans by the time we reach historically verified kings. This pattern could represent mythological inflation of the past, a common cultural tendency, or it could chart the gradual transition from Anunnaki rule to hybrid rule to fully human rule, with lifespans decreasing as the Anunnaki genetic component diluted across generations. The king list is not unique. The Egyptian civilization maintained similar chronologies extending rulership back to the time of the gods, the Zep Tepi, or first time when gods walked the earth. Manetho, an Egyptian priest writing in the 3rd century BCE, recorded dynasties of gods and demigods ruling Egypt for tens of thousands of years before the first human pharaohs. Hindu chronologies speak of yugas, vast ages spanning hundreds of thousands of years, during which gods and heroes interacted with humanity. These chronologies describe cycles of civilization rising and falling, knowledge gained and lost, divine presence and absence. Why would cultures separated by vast distances maintain similar chronological frameworks? Coincidence? Common psychological tendency to magnify the past? Or shared memory of an actual deep history involving beings with extended lifespans? Sink deeper. These questions need no answers tonight. They float away like leaves on a dark river, disappearing into distance. The technology attributed to the Anunnaki in various texts deserves examination. Weapons that shine like the sun and destroy mountains appear repeatedly. Flying vehicles that can traverse both sky and space are mentioned. Communication devices allowing instant contact across distances. Instruments that can see into the future or across vast distances. In the epic of Gilgamesh, the hero and his companion Enkidu journey to the cedar forest to confront Humbaba, a guardian set by Enlil to protect the sacred trees. Humbaba possesses weapons described as rays that can emanate from his mouth and paralyze enemies. When Gilgamesh defeats Humbaba, he takes these weapons. Later in the epic, Gilgamesh encounters Utnapishtim, the Sumerian flood survivor who was granted immortality by the gods. Utnapishtim lives far away, beyond the ocean, in a place that seems to exist outside normal geography. The journey to reach him involves passing through a tunnel of darkness where no light penetrates, guarded by scorpion beings. These details suggest more than simple myth. The scorpion beings might represent guards with scorpion-like weapons or armor. The tunnel of darkness could be a sealed passage, perhaps underground or through a mountain. Utnapishtim's remote location might indicate a place isolated deliberately, perhaps an Anunnaki outpost where humans were generally not permitted. When Gilgamesh finally meets Utnapishtim and asks for the secret of immortality, he's told about a plant that grows at the bottom of the ocean. Gilgamesh retrieves this plant but loses it on his journey home when a serpent steals and eats it, gaining the ability to shed its skin and renew itself. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk empty-handed, immortality denied to humanity once again. This plant of immortality has been interpreted various ways: a medicinal herb with life-extending properties, a metaphor for wisdom or spiritual enlightenment, or perhaps something more tangible, a biological sample, a genetic material, or a technological object described in terms a Bronze Age audience could understand. Your consciousness flickers like a candle in wind, barely maintaining its flame against the darkness. The ziggurat structures themselves contain mysteries worth contemplating as you drift towards sleep. These massive stepped pyramids required enormous resources to construct. Millions of mud bricks had to be made, dried, transported and assembled. Precise measurements and planning were essential. Thousands of workers laboured for years. The ziggurat of Ur, built around 2100 BCE and still partially standing, measures about 64 metres by 45 metres at its base and originally rose approximately 30 metres high. It was built with a solid core of mud brick and an outer skin of baked brick set in bitumen, a naturally occurring petroleum product used as mortar and waterproofing. The structure had 3 levels connected by monumental staircases. At the summit stood a temple room, the dwelling place of the moon god Nana. This room was modestly sized, not a large public space. It was the private residence of the god, where only the high priest could enter to tend to the deity's needs. What happened in these summit temples? Official accounts describe ritual offerings, prayers, and ceremonies. The high priest would bring food and drink to the god, dress the divine, statue, perform sacred rites. But were these purely symbolic acts, or did something more occur? If the Anunnaki were physical beings who periodically visited their temple cities, the summit room makes practical sense. It's isolated, private, accessible by air without needing to traverse the city streets. A landing platform, essentially. The offerings might have been actual provisions. The tending of the god might have been real interactions with visiting Anunnaki. The ziggurats were also equipped with sophisticated drainage systems, storage rooms, and sometimes elaborate decorative elements. The walls were often painted in multiple colours, and might have been visible from great distances, serving as landmarks and symbols of each city's connection to its patron deity. Similar structures worldwide suggest a common template. The pyramids of Egypt, while different in internal structure, share the concept of massive stone monuments aligned to astronomical phenomena. The Temple of the Inscriptions at Palenque in Mexico functions as both pyramid and tomb. The massive mounds of the Mississippi River Valley cultures, though less permanent, follow the same principle of elevated platforms for ritual purposes. Did all these cultures independently develop this architectural form? Or does it preserve a memory of an older template, perhaps taught by the Anunnaki or inherited from a common source? Rest now in not knowing. Uncertainty is not weakness but honesty. The universe keeps its secrets close. The concept of divine kingship, so central to ancient civilizations, becomes more comprehensible if early kings were actually hybrid Anunnaki human beings. These individuals would have been taller, stronger, more intelligent and longer lived than ordinary humans. They would have possessed knowledge inherited from their Anunnaki parent. They would have appeared quite literally as demigods. Ancient texts from multiple cultures describe these characteristics. The Nephilim of Genesis are described as giants, heroes, men of renown. Egyptian pharaohs were portrayed as larger than life, possessing divine powers. Sumerian kings claim to have drunk from the milk of the goddess, gaining superior qualities. As these hybrid bloodlines interbred with humans across generations, the Anunnaki genetic component would dilute. Each generation would be slightly more human, slightly less godlike. Eventually, kings would be genetically indistinguishable from their subjects, but the tradition of divine kingship persisted, now sustained by cultural institution rather than biological reality. This would explain the transition from the extraordinary kings of legend to the historical kings we can verify. It would account for why ancient texts describe gods walking among humans, while modern humans never encounter such beings. It wasn't that the gods left Earth entirely, but that they mixed with humanity until they became indistinguishable from us, their presence absorbed into our collective gene pool. Your DNA might contain fragments of Anunnaki genetic code, diluted across hundreds of generations but present nonetheless. That remarkable human brain, that capacity for abstract thought, that drive to explore and create. Perhaps these traits were gifts, engineered into our ancestors, now inherited by every human being. You are their legacy, their creation, their continuation in some sense. You carry them forward into the future, whether they were literal beings or metaphorical representations of humanity's own self-transformation. Sleep now, carrier of ancient genes and ancient dreams. The Anunnaki's understanding of astronomy far exceeded what should have been possible with naked eye observation alone. The Sumerians knew Earth was round, not flat. They understood the solar system's heliocentric structure thousands of years before Copernicus. They tracked planetary movements with precision that required sophisticated mathematics. The Mulopin tablets, dating to around 1000 BCE but recording much older knowledge, contain detailed astronomical observations. They catalogue over 60 constellations, document the movements of Venus with incredible accuracy, and provide information about the rising and setting times of various stars throughout the year. How did they acquire this knowledge? Patient observation over centuries could explain much of it. Mathematical sophistication could allow them to predict planetary movements once sufficient data was gathered, but some knowledge seems beyond what observation alone could provide. The precession of the equinoxes, for instance, takes approximately 26,000 years for a complete cycle. This means the position of the stars at the spring equinox slowly shifts over time. Discovering this phenomenon requires observations spanning many centuries, carefully recorded and compared. The Sumerians knew about precession. How? They also knew about planets beyond Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and according to Sitchin, Nibiru. Uranus is technically visible to the naked eye under perfect conditions, but it appears as a dim star indistinguishable from thousands of others without knowing where to look. Neptune is completely invisible without telescopic aid, yet cylinder seals and texts seem to reference these distant worlds. Either the Sumerians had optical technology we found no trace of, or they were taught this information by beings who had travelled through the solar system and knew its structure from direct observation. The Babylonian Enuma Anu Enlil is an enormous compendium of astronomical omens, consisting of about 7,000 celestial omens. It describes what various celestial events signify for the kingdom, the king, the harvest, and other important matters. This represents generations of astronomical observation correlated with historical events, but it also contains predictive astronomy that requires mathematical models of celestial mechanics. The ability to predict eclipses, for instance, demands understanding the complex relationships between the Sun, Moon, and Earth's orbital dynamics. The Babylonians could predict lunar eclipses with impressive accuracy. This astronomical knowledge wasn't merely academic, it was practical, used for navigation, calendar keeping, agricultural planning, and religious ceremonies. The knowledge shaped civilization, allowing coordinated social activity on scales previously impossible. If the Anunnaki provided this astronomical knowledge, they gave humanity a profound gift, the ability to orient ourselves in space and time, to understand our place in the cosmos, to measure and predict the movements of heaven. Drift through the stars now, consciousness expanding to cosmic scale, then contracting back to the simple fact of breath, pulse, existence. The library of Ashurbanipal, that vast repository of cuneiform tablets discovered in the ruins of Nineveh, contained not just myths and epics but also practical texts, medical treatises describing diagnoses and treatments, mathematical texts with advanced calculations, legal codes and contracts, letters between kings, administrative records tracking grain stores and labour assignments. These practical documents reveal a sophisticated civilization with institutions recognisable to modern eyes. They had bureaucracies, schools, courts, markets and industries. They worried about taxes, trade, war and succession. They were, in short, entirely human in their concerns. Yet interspersed among these mundane records are the god lists, ritual texts, and myths describing Anunnaki interactions. The scribes saw no contradiction. For them, the gods were simply part of reality, as real as grain harvests and military campaigns. Administrative texts sometimes mention consulting the gods before decisions or performing rituals to ensure divine favour. This integration of divine and mundane suggests that whatever the Anunnaki were, they were experienced as real and present, not as abstract theological concepts. People sacrificed to them expecting tangible results. Kings claimed their authority from them expecting the claim to be verified. Priests entered their temples expecting sometimes to encounter them. What would explain this if the Anunnaki weren't physically present? Mass delusion? Cultural conditioning? Or perhaps they maintained presence through representatives, priests who claimed to channel divine will, oracles who delivered messages, appearances stage managed to maintain belief. Or perhaps they were present, occasionally, appearing to selected individuals, maintaining just enough contact to sustain belief and ensure human civilization developed along desired lines. but not so much contact that they became commonplace rather than divine. Let these speculations fade. They're just thoughts, ephemeral as morning mist dissolving in the light of deeper consciousness. The Anunnaki's departure from active involvement in human affairs, if it occurred, must have been gradual. The texts suggest a transition period lasting centuries or millennia. First, the gods withdrew from daily presence but maintained temples and priesthoods. Then, even their temple appearances became rare, legendary events from the past. Finally, they became purely mythological, stories told but no longer expected to be encountered. This pattern fits various interpretations. If they were extraterrestrials, perhaps their mission concluded and they departed, leaving humans to our own development. If they were survivors of an earlier Earth civilization, perhaps they gradually died out or were absorbed into the expanding human population. If they were something else, interdimensional beings, time travelers, or manifestations from some other reality, perhaps they shifted away, their interaction with humanity ending as mysteriously as it began. From humanity's perspective, the disappearance of the gods must have been traumatic. Imagine a world where gods are real, visible, accessible through proper rituals. Then imagine those gods becoming distant, unresponsive, perhaps dying or leaving. The psychological and social impact would be enormous. Some texts hint at this transition. The Lament for Ur describes the destruction of that great city by invading forces around 2000 BCE. But before describing the military defeat, it describes the gods abandoning their temples, leaving the city unprotected. Nana, Ur's patron god, departed. Without divine protection, the city fell. Did the gods actually leave, or had people simply lost faith in their protection after military defeat? Or did some event, a change in political authority, the death of certain priest-kings, the loss of knowledge or technology, remove whatever maintained the illusion or reality of divine presence? The shift from polytheism to monotheism, which occurred gradually across the ancient Near East, might reflect this transition. If the Anunnaki were multiple physical beings who departed, people might eventually conclude that divinity itself must be elsewhere, in heaven perhaps, with a single supreme god who never left because he was never physically present to begin with. The transition from the age of visible gods to the age of absent gods marks a profound shift in human consciousness. We moved from experiencing the divine as tangible and immediate to understanding it as transcendent and distant. This shift shaped philosophy, theology, and ultimately our entire relationship with reality. The ancient Hebrew prophets, writing in the first millennium BCE, speak with nostalgia about earlier times when God walked in the Garden of Eden with Adam, or appeared directly to Abraham, Moses, and others. But by the prophet's own time, divine communication came through visions, dreams, and angels, intermediaries rather than direct encounters. Even these indirect communications became increasingly rare, leading to the concept of the silence of God that troubles theology to this day. This pattern of divine withdrawal appears across cultures. In Greek mythology, the age of heroes when gods regularly interacted with mortals gives way to more distant divine presence. Hindu texts describe the Satya Yuga, a golden age when gods walked among humans, followed by subsequent ages of increasing separation. Norse mythology anticipates Ragnarok, the final battle after which the old gods will be gone entirely. Are these independent cultural patterns, or memories of an actual transition? Did something happen, perhaps around 2000-1000 BCE, that fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with whatever we call the divine? Archaeological evidence shows significant upheaval during this period. The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE saw numerous advanced civilizations collapse simultaneously. The Hittite Empire fell, Mycenaean Greece dissolved, the Levantine city-states were destroyed, Egypt survived but diminished. This catastrophe's cause remains debated: climate change, earthquake storms, sea peoples' invasions, internal rebellions, or some combination. Alternative researchers sometimes propose this collapse resulted from the Anunnaki's final departure, removing the stabilizing force that had maintained civilization. Without divine oversight, human kingdoms fought each other to exhaustion, and knowledge systems maintained by priest specialists were lost. The counter-argument is that human agency alone suffices to explain collapse. Civilizations fall due to environmental pressure, resource depletion, social tension, and military conflict. No divine presence or absence is necessary. yet the coincidence is striking. The age when gods departed from myth corresponds roughly to the age when civilizations collapsed and had to rebuild themselves. The civilizations that emerged from this dark age were different, more human-centered, less god-focused. Philosophy and rational inquiry began to replace divine revelation as sources of knowledge. Your mind barely grasps these threads now, consciousness fragmenting into dreams and images rather than coherent thoughts. The number systems of ancient Mesopotamia carry their own mysteries. The Sumerians used a sexagesimal system, base 60 mathematics, rather than the base 10 system most modern cultures use. This gives us 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. Mathematical conventions we still follow without understanding their origin. Why base 60? It has practical advantages. 60 is divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 and 60. 12 factors, making fraction calculations easier than base 10. Ancient commerce and astronomy both benefited from this divisibility. But how did the Sumerians, emerging as civilization's first example, immediately possess such sophisticated mathematics? Usually mathematical systems evolve gradually, starting simple and growing complex. The Sumerian system appears fully formed in the earliest tablets, as if imported whole rather than developed organically. The same applies to their writing system. Cuneiform writing appears around 3400 BCE, already capable of representing complex thoughts. Earlier tokens and seals suggest proto-writing, but the leap to full writing seems remarkably rapid. Compare this to how long it took human cultures to develop writing independently in other regions. The gap between proto-writing and full writing usually spans many centuries. Did the Anunnaki provide these systems? The texts claim Enki gave humanity writing, mathematics, and other civilizational tools. If literal, this would explain the apparent sudden appearance of sophisticated systems. Alternatively, perhaps there were earlier civilizations, human or otherwise, that developed these systems, which were then borrowed by the Sumerians. The mathematics and writing might be much older than we realize, with Sumer representing not the origin, but the earliest surviving example. The mystery extends to language itself. The Sumerian language is an isolate, unrelated to any other known language family. It has no clear ancestors or relatives. It appears in written form already fully developed. Where did it come from? Linguistic isolates exist. Basque, Burushaski and others, but usually in mountainous or isolated regions where populations were protected from invasion and mixing. Sumer was in a river valley, accessible from multiple directions, regularly invaded and influenced by neighbouring peoples. How did their language remain isolated, unless it wasn't indigenous? Unless Sumerian was the language of the Anunnaki, taught to humans who had no language or only primitive proto-languages. This would make Sumerian a gift, like writing and mathematics, part of the civilizational package provided by our creators. Float now through linguistic space, where words lose meaning and become pure sound, rhythm, breath. The concept of the Abzu, Enki's domain, deserves deeper contemplation as sleep approaches. In Sumerian cosmology, the Abzu was the primordial freshwater ocean beneath the earth, the source of all life-giving water. Rivers, springs and wells drew from the Abzu. It represented potential, fertility, and the chaotic creative force from which order emerges. Enki's association with the Abzu positioned him as the god of depths, hidden knowledge, secret wisdom, the unconscious if we apply Jungian interpretation. His temple at Eridu was called the Abzu, the House of the Abzu, supposedly built at the very spot where the primordial waters emerged. Modern readers might interpret the Abzu as representing groundwater, aquifers beneath the surface. Ancient Mesopotamians would have observed springs and wells providing water seemingly from nowhere, suggesting vast reserves below. This interpretation makes Enki the god of hydrology, the water cycle, the unseen systems that make life possible. But texts describe Enki dwelling in the Abzu, having a palace there, treasures stored in its depths. If taken literally, this suggests an underground location, perhaps cave systems or constructed subterranean spaces. Archaeological evidence confirms ancient peoples did create underground chambers for various purposes: storage, refuge, ritual. Could the Abzu have been an actual Anunnaki base, underground to protect against environmental extremes or to remain hidden from surface-dwelling humans? advanced civilizations might well prefer underground facilities, naturally temperature regulated, protected from weather and prying eyes, secure. The me were kept in the Abzu, remember? All civilizations' fundamental knowledge stored in Enki's underwater, underground domain. A secure backup facility, perhaps, preserving crucial information against surface catastrophes. Many ancient traditions speak of hidden underground cities or realms. The Greek underworld, the Tibetan Shambhala, the Hopi emergence from underground worlds. Agartha and Hollow Earth theories, though scientifically unsupported, reflect persistent cross-cultural legends of civilizations beneath the surface. Are these pure mythology, or distorted memories of something real? Advanced civilizations facing surface catastrophes might retreat underground. Ancient bases or cities, long abandoned, might leave traces discoverable by later peoples who construct myths to explain what they find. Let these underground labyrinths extend through your consciousness, passages leading deeper, always deeper, toward the source of everything. The Great Flood narrative, appearing in Sumerian, Akkadian, Hebrew, and countless other traditions, represents perhaps the most universal human myth. Nearly every culture has a flood story, usually involving divine judgment, a chosen survivor, and the repopulation of Earth. The Epic of Gilgamesh's flood account is remarkably detailed. Utnapishtim describes how Ea, Enki, warned him the gods had decided to destroy humanity. He was instructed to build a boat of specific dimensions, making it cube-shaped, coating it with bitumen inside and out, and bringing aboard the seed of all living creatures. The dimensions given, 120 cubits on each side, would create an enormous vessel, more like an ark than a boat, designed for capacity rather than navigation. The cubic shape wouldn't sail well, but would be stable and maximize internal volume. It sounds less like a boat and more like a floating container, a preservation chamber. The flood lasted 7 days and nights. Waters covered the earth completely, destroying all life except what Utnapishtim preserved. When waters receded, the boat landed on Mount Nimush. Utnapishtim released birds to test whether land had emerged. First a dove, then a swallow, finally a raven that didn't return, indicating dry land. This account predates the biblical Noah story by over 1,000 years, yet the parallels are undeniable. Same basic plot, similar details, even the bird releasing sequence matches. Clearly, both draw from older shared tradition. What was this original event? Geological evidence confirms Earth has experienced catastrophic floods, particularly during periods of rapid climate change. The Black Sea deluge, the flooding of Doggerland in the North Sea, the inundation of coastal areas worldwide as Ice Age glaciers melted. These were real events that would have seemed apocalyptic to affected populations. But could there have been a deliberate global flood? An attempt by advanced beings to reset human civilization? The technology required would be enormous, triggering volcanic eruptions, destabilizing ice sheets, perhaps even asteroid impacts carefully calculated to cause maximum water displacement. Why would they do this? The texts say humanity had become too numerous, too noisy, too troublesome. Perhaps humans were developing too rapidly, threatening to discover things the Anunnaki wanted kept hidden. Or perhaps genetic hybridization had gone wrong, creating unstable populations requiring elimination and restart with carefully selected stock. Utnapishtim was chosen for survival because he was righteous, or pure, genetically desirable perhaps, containing optimal Anunnaki human genetic mixture. His family and the preserved species would repopulate Earth with a fresh start, previous mistakes erased. This darker interpretation portrays the Anunnaki not as beneficent creators, but as pragmatic geneticists willing to destroy failed experiments. It suggests humanity's relationship with our creators is more complex, more troubling than simple worship. Drift through these troubling waters, but don't drown in them. They're just stories, just possibilities, just darkness before dawn. The Tower of Babel story, recorded in Genesis but with clear Mesopotamian roots, describes humanity uniting to build a tower reaching heaven. God, seeing this, confuses their language so they cannot cooperate, scattering them across the earth. The story explains linguistic diversity, while also suggesting divine fear of human potential. If, as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them, God says in the biblical account. This implies limitation of human achievement not because we lack ability, but because we lack unity and communication. The historical Babel is likely the Anunnaki ziggurat in Babylon dedicated to Marduk. This massive structure was repeatedly built, destroyed, and rebuilt across centuries. Its name means foundation of heaven and earth, suggesting it was seen as a connection point between realms. If we interpret this myth through an Anunnaki lens, it becomes an account of humans attempting to reach the god's domain without permission. The tower represents human ambition, the drive to transcend our created limitations. The language confusion represents deliberate sabotage, preventing humans from organising large-scale projects that might threaten Anunnaki supremacy. Language diversity has indeed hindered human cooperation throughout history. Imagine if all humans spoke one language. Wouldn't international cooperation, knowledge sharing, and collective action be vastly easier? Did someone or something benefit from keeping us divided by linguistic barriers? Or is this paranoid interpretation, and the story simply explains linguistic diversity through mythological framework? Languages naturally diverge as populations separate. No intervention required. Yet the theme recurs, humans attempting to rise to divine status, reaching for knowledge or power beyond their station, and being forcibly limited. Prometheus stealing fire and being eternally punished. Icarus flying too high and falling. Eve eating from the tree of knowledge and being expelled from Eden. Adapa refusing immortality, the tower being destroyed. Always the same message. Know your place, remain limited, accept your role. Is this wisdom, recognizing healthy boundaries, or control, keeping a created species subordinate? Sleep now, not solving but pondering. Questions without answers can still illuminate. The concept of divine kingship reached its peak in ancient Egypt, where pharaohs were not merely appointed by gods but were gods incarnate. The pharaoh was Horus in life, Osiris in death. He was the divine bridge between human and celestial realms. Egyptian mythology describes the Zep Tepi, the first time when gods ruled Egypt directly. A succession of divine dynasties preceded human pharaohs: Ta, Ra, Shu, Geb, Osiris, Seth, and Horus. Each ruled in turn for thousands of years before the first human dynasty began. Manetho's chronology, preserved in fragments by later historians, lists these divine rulers with reign lengths spanning millennia. Modern Egyptologists dismiss these as mythological, but the Egyptians themselves took them seriously, including them in official king lists alongside verified historical pharaohs. The transition from divine to human rule in Egypt parallels the Sumerian pattern. First, gods rule directly. Then demigods, or divine human hybrids, rule. Finally, fully human kings rule with claimed divine descent but no direct divine presence. Egyptian royal bloodlines practice sibling marriage, supposedly to keep the divine bloodline pure. This genetic practice would make sense if early pharaohs were actually hybrids, and maintaining certain genetic traits was important. Sibling marriage concentrates genetic characteristics, amplifying both desired traits and genetic problems. The elongated skulls found in some royal Egyptian mummies might indicate genetic features associated with the divine bloodline. Some researchers propose these represent actual anatomical differences between hybrid and full human populations. Others argue they result from intentional cranial binding, a cultural practice unrelated to genetics. The Egyptian belief in the afterlife, the elaborate mummification process, and the vast pyramid tombs all suggest expectations of physical resurrection or continued bodily existence. Were these cultural beliefs, or did early Egyptians possess knowledge of medical technologies that could revive or preserve consciousness? The pyramid texts, carved inside pyramids of the Old Kingdom, contain spells and instructions for the deceased pharaoh's journey to join the gods in the sky. They describe transforming into a star, sailing in the solar bark with Ra, ascending on beams of sunlight. Are these metaphorical spiritual journeys, or encoded descriptions of actual technologies, spacecraft perhaps, that would carry bodies or consciousness to an orbital station or distant world? Your consciousness ascends now, not to stars but to the realm of dreams, leaving the body behind while retaining some tenuous connection. The Osiris myth provides another layer of mystery. Osiris was a god-king who brought civilization to Egypt, teaching agriculture, law, and religion. His brother Seth, jealous of his power, murdered Osiris and dismembered his body, scattering the pieces throughout Egypt. Isis, Osiris's wife and sister, searched for the pieces, reassembled them, and through magical means resurrected Osiris long enough to conceive Horus, their son. Osiris then became ruler of the underworld, the land of the dead, while Horus assumed kingship of the living. This death-resurrection-ascension pattern appears across cultures: Osiris, Dionysus, Adonis, Attis, Jesus. The pattern represents agricultural cycles, say scholars: seed going into earth, death; germinating, resurrection; producing grain, new life. Or it represents spiritual initiation, the death of the old self and birth of the new. But what if it also preserves memory of actual medical procedures? If the Anunnaki possessed advanced biotechnology, they might be able to revive recently deceased individuals, repair damaged bodies, or transfer consciousness between bodies. To observers without scientific understanding, such procedures would appear as resurrection magic. Isis's search for Osiris's scattered pieces and their reassembly might describe gathering genetic samples or body parts for cloning or reconstruction. The conception of Horus after Osiris's death might indicate artificial insemination or in vitro fertilization using preserved genetic material. These interpretations seem far-fetched, imposing modern science onto ancient myth. Yet the myths themselves contain curious details that resist simple symbolic interpretation. Why specify that Osiris was cut into 14 pieces? Why emphasize Isis's careful reassembly? Why mention that one piece, the phallus, could not be found, requiring Isis to create a replacement? These specific details suggest the story preserves a memory of actual events, even if we no longer understand what those events were or how to interpret them accurately. Drift through dismemberment and reassembly, death and resurrection, endings that become beginnings. The concept of the Ka and Ba in Egyptian spirituality offers another perspective on consciousness and identity. The Ka was a person's life force, created at birth as a spiritual double. The Be was the personality, the mobile aspect of spirit that could leave the body. After death, Ka and Be needed to reunite to form the Ak, the transformed, enlightened spirit. This complex psychology recognizes consciousness as multiple components, not a single unified thing. Modern neuroscience increasingly validates this view. We don't have one consciousness, but multiple neural processes creating the illusion of unified awareness. Did the Egyptians understand consciousness better than we give them credit for? Did they recognize that identity involves multiple systems: biological life, Ka, personality, memory, Ba, and their integration, Ak? If the Anunnaki possessed advanced neuroscience, they might have explained consciousness to humans using these categories. Perhaps they could manipulate these components, extracting memory, personality, preserving life force, transferring consciousness between substrates. The elaborate Egyptian funerary practices might have been attempts to preserve all components necessary for later restoration. Mummification preserved the body, physical anchor. Tomb texts preserved knowledge and identity, memory backup. Grave goods provided resources, supplies for revival. Were they primitive attempts to copy advanced Anunnaki preservation technologies? Or were they cargo cult responses to observed but misunderstood procedures, creating imitations without grasping underlying principles? The Egyptians' obsession with preservation and resurrection might reflect a time when such things were actually possible, performed by Anunnaki medical technology. After the technology was lost or withdrawn, humans continued the practices hoping to achieve the same results through ritual and faith. Your body lies still, preserved in sleep's temporary death, awaiting resurrection with the dawn. The relationship between Egyptian and Sumerian civilizations raises geographic questions. These cultures developed independently, with different languages, writing systems, and mythologies. Yet they share fundamental concepts: multiple gods with specialized domains, divine kingship, flood myths, creation narratives involving gods forming humans from clay. Trade routes connected Mesopotamia and Egypt from early periods. Ideas could travel these routes, but the similarities seem deeper than borrowed concepts. They suggest shared origins or external influence affecting both regions. Some alternative researchers propose a common source civilization, perhaps Atlantis or another lost culture, that seeded knowledge in both regions. The surviving civilizations would then represent successor cultures, inheriting fragments of older wisdom and interpreting them through their unique cultural lenses. The Egyptian god Thoth, associated with writing, magic and wisdom, bears similarities to the Mesopotamian Enki. Both teach civilization, both preserve knowledge, both mediate between divine and human realms. Different names, different cultural contexts, but perhaps remembering the same figure or type of figure. The Egyptian Ptah, creator god who spoke the world into existence through divine words, parallels Mesopotamian creation accounts where gods speak commands that materialize reality. This concept of creative speech, of language having literal power to shape reality, might preserve understanding of technologies so advanced they appear magical. Nanotechnology, perhaps, or quantum manipulation controlled through linguistic command codes. Arthur C. Clarke's third law states that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. If the Anunnaki possessed technology thousands of years ahead of Bronze Age humanity, their tools would appear as magical implements, their capabilities as divine powers. A handheld communication device would be a speaking stone, allowing instant contact across distances. A holographic display would be a vision tablet showing distant places or times. A medical diagnostic tool would be an oracle, revealing hidden truths about health. A weapon using directed energy would be a divine bolt, striking from the god's hands. Reinterpreting myths through this technological lens transforms gods into engineers, magic into science, divine powers into advanced tools. But does this reinterpretation illuminate truth or impose modern biases onto narratives that meant something entirely different to their creators? Sleep deeper now, where interpretation dissolves, where meaning becomes fluid, where ancient and modern merge. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, describes cosmic battles between gods that result in the formation of Earth. Tiamat, the primordial chaos goddess, battles Marduk, the champion of the younger gods. Marduk defeats Tiamat and splits her body, creating heaven from one half and earth from the other. Sitchin interpreted this as describing an actual cosmic collision. He proposed that Nibiru, entering the solar system from space, collided with Tiamat, a planet that once existed between Mars and Jupiter. This collision split Tiamat, creating Earth and the asteroid belt from the remnants. Mainstream astronomy dismisses this scenario. The formation of Earth and the solar system is well established through scientific evidence. No collision event with a rogue planet is necessary or supported by data. The asteroid belt's total mass is far too small to represent a destroyed planet. Yet the myth describes creation through conflict and division, pattern against pattern, order emerging from chaos through violent interaction. This resonates with our understanding of cosmic evolution. Galaxies colliding, stars exploding, planets forming from accretion disks where countless smaller bodies smash together. Perhaps the Enuma Elish preserves accurate knowledge of cosmic processes, even if the specific details don't match our modern understanding. Perhaps the Anunnaki taught humans about planetary formation using narrative frameworks accessible to Bronze Age minds. Or perhaps it's simply how humans naturally explain creation, through stories of conflict and resolution, destruction and rebuilding, chaos giving birth to order. These patterns appear in creation myths worldwide because they reflect how we experience and understand transformation. The boundaries blur between literal and symbolic, between historical memory and archetypal pattern, between what happened and what it means. Float now in that boundary space, neither fully asleep nor awake, where meanings shift like shadows. The story of Inanna's descent to the underworld operates on multiple levels. Literally, it's a myth about the death and resurrection of a goddess. Symbolically, it represents seasonal cycles or initiatory transformation. But might it also preserve memory of actual events? Inanna descends through 7 gates, removing an article of power at each. Her crown, her necklace, her jewels, her breastplate, her golden ring, her measuring rod and line, and finally her royal robe. She arrives naked and powerless before Ereshkigal, her sister, queen of the underworld. Ereshkigal kills Inanna and hangs her corpse on a hook. 3 days pass. Finally Enki intervenes, creating mourning beings from the dirt under his fingernails. These creatures retrieve Inanna's body and sprinkle it with the food and water of life, reviving her. The 7 gates might represent checkpoints or security stations. The removal of items might describe disarming procedures. Equipment must be surrendered before entering restricted areas. The death and revival might describe a medical procedure requiring complete stillness, appearing as death to observers. Why descend to the underworld? Ancient texts offer various explanations. To conquer it, to attend a funeral, to replace Ereshkigal. But perhaps the underworld represents an underground facility, and the descent describes accessing secret chambers beneath the surface. The food and water of life that revive Inanna, are these medical substances? Pharmaceutical compounds that restart biological processes? Or is the story purely mythological, the details arbitrary rather than preserving actual events? We cannot know. The gap between Bronze Age text and modern interpretation is vast. We bring our assumptions, our categories, our ways of understanding to ancient stories that serve purposes we can barely comprehend. Yet something in these stories calls to us across millennia, insisting they matter, that they contain truths worth preserving, even if we've lost the keys to decode them fully. Your breathing is almost imperceptible, barely disturbing the stillness that surrounds and fills you. The concept of genetic engineering, so central to modern Anunnaki interpretations, was obviously unknown to ancient peoples. Yet descriptions of creating humans by mixing divine essence with earthly clay could be ancient language for genetic manipulation. The biblical account in Genesis describes God forming man from dust and breathing life into him. The Sumerian account describes gods mixing their blood with clay and having birth goddesses shape the mixture. The Greek Prometheus fashions humans from clay, and Athena breathes life into them. Clay, organic matter, the physical stuff of bodies. Divine breath, or blood, the information, the pattern, the code that organises matter into living form. Modern translation. DNA from Anunnaki combined with DNA from existing hominids produces human beings. The 7 birth goddesses mentioned in some Sumerian texts might represent 7 genetic engineering stations, or 7 successful genetic lines. The multiple failed attempts before humans were successfully created might describe laboratory failures before achieving a viable hybrid genome. The Genesis phrase, "Let us make man in our image," uses plural language. Who is us? Traditional theology says it's the royal plural or God consulting with angels. Alternative interpretation. Multiple Anunnaki scientists discussing a genetic project. Modern genetics has decoded the human genome, revealing our complete genetic sequence. We share DNA with all Earth life, confirming common evolutionary ancestry. Yet within our genome are mysteries geneticists continue investigating. Humans possess unusual genetic features, a fusion of 2 ape chromosomes into 1 human chromosome, creating human chromosome 2. Rapid evolution of brain size and complexity over the past few million years. Genetic bottlenecks suggesting population crashes followed by expansions. Endogenous retroviruses showing ancient viral infections now permanently embedded in our DNA. Do any of these features suggest engineering rather than natural evolution? Mainstream science says no. All are explicable through natural processes. Alternative researchers point to oddities they claim need better explanation. The truth is, we don't fully understand human evolution yet. Gaps remain in the fossil record. Genetic mysteries persist. New discoveries regularly revise our understanding. Perhaps one day we'll discover definitive evidence of genetic engineering in human ancestry. Or perhaps we'll confirm natural evolution explains everything. Or perhaps the truth is more complex, involving both natural processes and directed intervention in ways we haven't yet imagined. Drift through spiralling DNA, code written in chemicals, messages from the past encoded in every cell of your body. The Anunnaki concept provides one framework for thinking about human origins, but it's not the only alternative to pure evolutionary materialism. Other theories propose intervention by interdimensional beings, time travelers from humanity's future, artificial intelligence from a previous civilization, or spiritual forces beyond current scientific understanding. Each framework has strengths and weaknesses, evidence and gaps. None can be proven definitively with current knowledge. All require some degree of faith or speculation beyond available data. What matters perhaps is not which theory is correct, but what contemplating these theories does for us. They expand our thinking. They prevent scientific orthodoxy from calcifying into dogma. They remind us that mystery remains, that we don't have all answers, that surprise discoveries might overturn current understanding. The history of science is filled with such overturnings. The sun doesn't revolve around Earth. Time is relative, not absolute. Space is curved. Quantum mechanics allows particles to be in multiple states simultaneously. each discovery forced reconceptualization of reality. Perhaps future discoveries will force similar reconceptualization regarding human origins, or perhaps current scientific consensus will be validated and will confirm that natural selection acting on random mutations over millions of years fully explains human emergence without need for external intervention. Either way, the questions we ask shape us. The mysteries we contemplate train our minds. The frameworks we develop for understanding reality influence what we look for and what we can discover. So the Anunnaki, whether real or imagined, serve a purpose. They keep ancient wisdom alive. They preserve alternative narratives. They provoke questions. They inspire imagination. They connect us to our ancestors who wondered about the same things. Sleep deeper now. Questions fade. Only the deep rhythms remain. Breath, pulse, the quiet electrical activity of the brain generating consciousness from neurons firing in patterns. The sacred marriage ritual practiced in ancient Mesopotamia involved the king ritually copulating with a priestess representing Inanna. This ceremony, performed annually, supposedly ensured fertility of the land, prosperity of the kingdom, and continuity of the divine-human connection. Modern scholars interpret it as fertility ritual, sympathetic magic where sacred sex ensures agricultural abundance. But might it have had a more literal purpose originally? If early kings were hybrid Anunnaki human, maintaining their divine genetic component might require periodic introduction of Anunnaki genetics. The priestess in these rituals wasn't just any woman, but a specifically chosen, specially trained representative of the goddess. What if she carried Anunnaki genetics, preserved through carefully maintained bloodlines? The sacred marriage would then function as genetic maintenance program, refreshing the royal bloodline's divine component. Over time, as the Anunnaki withdrew and their genetics diluted, the ritual would lose its original practical function, but persist as cultural tradition. The biological purpose would be forgotten, but the religious significance would remain, performed out of habit and belief, even though it no longer achieved its original goal. This pattern, biological reality, transformed into religious ritual after the original purpose is forgotten, might explain many ancient practices that seem bizarre or pointless to modern observers. Their cargo cult responses to lost technologies, attempts to recreate effects without understanding causes. Temple prostitution, widespread in ancient Near Eastern cultures, might have similar origins. Not mere fertility cult practices, but remnants of genetic programs requiring genetic diversity or specific combinations. Sacred prostitutes weren't degraded but honoured, performing crucial biological religious functions. Our modern revulsion at these practices stems from contemporary moral frameworks. Ancient peoples saw them differently, as necessary sacred acts maintaining cosmic order. Neither perspective is objectively correct. Morality evolves with culture and context. Rest now in moral ambiguity, where judgment dissolves, where ancient and modern ethics coexist without conflict. The Epic of Error describes a catastrophic war between Babylonian gods resulting in massive destruction. Error, god of plague and war, convinces Marduk to leave his temple temporarily. With Marduk absent, Error wreaks havoc, destroying cities and slaughtering humans. Eventually Marduk returns and order is restored, but not before tremendous damage has been done. The text, dated to around 800 BCE, describes this as historical events within recent memory, not mythological deep past. Was this an actual war between factions of Anunnaki, fought with weapons that seemed divine to human observers? Nuclear weapons would explain the destructive scale described. Biological weapons would explain the plagues. Directed energy weapons would explain the gods' ability to destroy at distance. The ruins of ancient cities in the Near East sometimes show evidence of intense heat that vitrified stone, melted it into glass. Natural explanations include lightning strikes, burning cities, or volcanic activity. Alternative explanations propose nuclear detonations or directed energy weapons. The Mahabharata, ancient Indian epic, describes the Brahmastra, a weapon of total destruction used in ancient wars between kingdoms. The descriptions, blinding light, mushroom clouds, lingering sickness, areas rendered uninhabitable, sound remarkably like nuclear weapons. Are these coincidental similarities, or do ancient texts preserve memories of ancient wars fought with weapons we consider modern? If advanced civilizations existed in prehistory, They might have destroyed themselves with powerful weapons, a pattern humanity seems disturbingly capable of repeating. The Anunnaki's departure might have resulted from such conflicts. Having devastated Earth with warfare, they withdrew, leaving humans to recover and rebuild without their presence. The gods didn't leave by choice but fled the consequences of their own destructive capabilities. Or perhaps they never fought such wars, and these texts describe natural catastrophes, comets, asteroids, volcanic supereruptions, mega-tsunamis, interpreted through warfare metaphors because ancient peoples understood divine conflict better than celestial mechanics. Float through destruction and renewal, endings that seed new beginnings, death that makes space for life. The question of why we don't find clearer evidence of Anunnaki presence troubles these theories. If advanced beings lived on Earth for thousands of years, mining operations and cities and technologies, where are the artifacts? Several answers are proposed. First, the evidence might exist but be unrecognised. Archaeological context determines interpretation. Strange artifacts dismissed as natural formations or misunderstood cultural items might actually be technological remnants. Second, advanced technology might be designed to degrade, leaving minimal trace. Modern electronics become useless e-waste within years. Material science could produce substances that function brilliantly but decompose completely after their useful life. Third, deliberate removal of evidence might have occurred. If the Anunnaki wanted to leave Earth without clear proof of their existence, they could remove or destroy their installations, taking key technologies with them and demolishing what remained. Fourth, catastrophic events might have destroyed evidence. Floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and the simple passage of time erase most traces. Cities buried under meters of sediment remain undiscovered. Ocean levels rose significantly since the Ice Age, submerging coastal areas where ancient civilizations might have existed. Fifth, we might have found evidence but misidentified it. The Baghdad Battery, Antikythera mechanism, Piri Reis map, and other out-of-place artifacts suggest ancient technological sophistication beyond conventional timelines. Mainstream archaeology explains these within known historical contexts. Alternative researchers see them as hints of lost advanced knowledge. The absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, as the saying goes, but it's also not evidence of presence. The burden of proof rests with claims of extraordinary intervention, and that proof must be compelling to overturn established scientific consensus. Yet science should remain open to evidence wherever it leads. Dismissing possibilities prematurely because they contradict current models risks missing genuine discoveries. The history of science includes countless examples of ridiculable hypotheses eventually proven correct. Sink now beneath the burden of proof, beneath the weight of evidence, into realms where certainty dissolves and possibility reigns. The modern UFO phenomenon, if related to Anunnaki activity, suggests they haven't truly left but remain present in hidden or limited ways. Reports of unidentified aerial phenomena go back centuries, described in language appropriate to each era: celestial portents, airships, flying saucers, tic-tac-shaped craft. Government investigations, declassified documents, and credible witness testimony have moved UFOs from fringe pseudoscience towards serious inquiry. The US military now officially acknowledges encounters with unexplained aerial objects performing maneuvers beyond known human technology. Are these craft Anunnaki vehicles, or different extraterrestrial species, or advanced human technology kept secret, or natural phenomena misinterpreted, or some combination? If the Anunnaki created humanity and periodically returned to monitor their creation, UFO sightings might represent surveillance missions. They watch from distance, occasionally intervening in limited ways, generally avoiding direct contact that would disrupt human development. The concept of a zoo hypothesis in exobiology proposes that advanced civilizations might observe younger civilizations without direct contact, like researchers studying animals in their natural habitat. The Prime Directive in Star Trek codifies this principle. Don't interfere with developing civilizations. Perhaps the Anunnaki follow similar protocols. They watch, they record, they occasionally adjust conditions, but they don't reveal themselves openly. Humanity must develop authentically, learning our own lessons, making our own mistakes, achieving our own breakthroughs. Or perhaps UFOs are entirely unrelated to ancient astronaut theories. Perhaps multiple extraterrestrial species visit Earth, none connected to our origins. Perhaps we're not as special as ancient astronaut theories suggest. Not a designed species, but simply one of many species in a populated, vibrant galaxy. All possibilities converge here, in the quiet moment between thought and sleep. The past is vast, the present fleeting, the future unknown. The Anunnaki and the Brahmastra, the sacred sex rites and the declassified UFO reports, they are all echoes in a cave, reflections of our own persistent bewilderment. You are the final living artifact of whatever forces shaped your emergence. The history of the cosmos is encoded in your DNA, the history of culture in your language, and the history of consciousness in the firing of your neurons. The questions have done their work. They have stretched your mind, illuminated the boundaries of knowledge, and shown you the vast, fertile ground of the unknown. Sleep deeper still. The pulse of the planet is beneath you, the quiet, massive gravity holding you gently to its surface. You're made of the same stardust as the gods, the same elements as the weapons that shattered the ancient world. You're a biological miracle asking a philosophical question. Let the ancient stories recede now. Let the theories dissolve. You do not need to choose a reality. Reality chooses you, one breath at a time. Now, simply be.